There we are. We're officially on. Tony Alexander, welcome to the Luke Farr Show to motivate, educate, and inspire our next generation of leaders. Thank you, kind sir, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks very much, Luke, for having us on. And look forward to whatever it is we're going to be talking about fairly shortly.
well, it's going to be you. It's not going to be about me. I guess kindly for the audience out there. I mean, Tony, you're so famous. Do we even need to do a bio for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't seek the publicity. Years ago, I know I was the most quoted economist there for a while, about 10 or 12 years ago, but I've never actually made a press release or anything like that. New Zealanders are simply eager for information on the economy, a reasonable view on the economy, a reasonable view on maybe what interest rates are going to do, what the housing market seems to do. And I tend to write and speak in a language which average people, my family and my parents maybe, could understand. So there always seems to have been a receptive audience out there. And maybe sort of one of the breakthroughs for me was early on in about 1991, 92 for 18 months. Each morning at 20 to 7, I'd have a chat about exchange rates with Paul Holmes on the radio, 1ZB, up in Auckland. And I think a lot of people got to know me back at that time, 3 decades ago.
Yeah, fantastic. And 3 decades ago, I mean, since the 1980s, writing more about the New Zealand economy than anyone else in NZ history. And the past 2 decades, you've delivered between 80 to 120 presentations each year around New Zealand and offshore. I mean, let's talk basics here just for a minute. I mean, what actually is a recession by definition?
Oh, if there's a recession in your economy, by definition, it's when it shrinks for 2 quarters in a row. But if you have a look at the United States, technically, they had a recession last year with shrinkage of 2 quarters in a row. It's not officially considered a recession because the jobs market still remains strong. And I think that's the way most of us economists are looking at the situation here in New Zealand, that even as the economy shrank by 0.8% late last year, early this year, job numbers still went up about 1.3%. So it's a period of deep challenge for many businesses. Margins are tight, profitability is low, sourcing labor is difficult. So I prefer to call it a period of economic challenge rather than a recession as such.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the insights. And just tracking back a little bit here after doing some research, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, your father was a home builder in Christchurch, designing his own houses with beautiful wooden beam ceilings, popular at the time, along with ownership flats and standard houses. He unfortunately had to place the business into voluntary liquidation around 1978 when the economy and building sector in particular were hit by the quadrupling of oil prices over 1973 and 74 respectively. I mean, from your dad at like a very young age, I mean, what inspired you to go on to be BNZ's economist for 26 years?
Chief economist for almost 25 years. For me, I got into economics basically because when Dad's business was struggling there and unfortunately had to go under, which is the nature of the house building cycle. For the past 12 years, it's been all upward with construction in the house building industry in New Zealand. And 2.5 years ago, I was warning a lot of builders, take some risk off the table. This thing is going to turn around. And I've seen it in my own face back in the late 1970s. And what happened was, of course, Mum got pretty depressed at the prospect of losing all our beautiful house in Marshlands, Christchurch there. And she went to the doctor and she says, I'm depressed. And presumably she said, give me the pills. And he said, no. And he said, she told me, he told her to go away and read a book. And I said, what book did he tell you to read, Mum? And she said, The Grapes of Wrath. It's a book by John Steinbeck, United States, a story set in the times of the Great Depression, where in Oklahoma, the tilling of the soil combined with a lot of wind and all the topsoil blew away. And you got the TV series Beverly Hillbillies eventually, where people got on their jalopies and headed to the west, with all their worldly goods. So that was a story of people experiencing very bad times. I said to Mum, what is the book about? And she said, the Great Depression. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, go find out. And so I started reading about the Great Depression. So at this stage, I guess I was about, 15 years old, or I was, still in high school there. And I found I was interested in it. I seemed to understand a bit of what it was about. And by the time I got myself to fifth form, certainly the start of the sixth form at school, which would be year 12, I was already reading the first year university texts, and so decided to go to university at the end of year 12 when I was 16, and sort of never looked back from there, doing largely economics and maths.
Yeah, fantastic. Tony, just double checking. I just wanted to check your internet connection. I'm just checking mine as well. I'm just getting sort of every second word come through. Is there a lag on your end?
Sometimes you come through with a little bit of a lag. Shouldn't be. I'm here across in Australia at the moment on the Gold Coast. We've got the full internet, high speed in the apartment here.
Very interesting. Let me just whip into hotspot. I've got unlimited, and I'll just see if that has an impact.
Okay.
Give me 2 seconds. Right, we'll see if that flows a little bit better.
Yep. Yeah, okay. So if I'm talking like this, is it all coming through okay? Each word?
Oh, well. Yep, that's great. Oh, fantastic. All righty, moving swiftly along. Hey, let's track back many moons ago. University of Canterbury there, you got your first class honours, Master of Arts, obviously in economics. I mean, do you fundamentally still think today university is very important? And if so, why?
Oh, not for everybody. I mean, that's been, I think, one of the unfortunate outcomes of the 80s, the 90s into the 2000s, where we saw a rise in many businesses taking on board graduates, initially not knowing what to do with them. They'd take on graduate trainees in the 1980s. And I started out eventually after the Reserve Bank of Australia in Sydney as a graduate trainee at Westpac in Sydney from 1985. And they didn't know what to do with us, I think, to some degree. And the view sort of came across with relatively high unemployment for a number of years in New Zealand and overseas. If you want to get ahead, you've got to get more qualifications. Well, what I saw around me was a lot of people going to university who just didn't belong there. They didn't have the academic way of thinking, and a lot of people couldn't adjust from a system of when you're at school, the teachers are teaching you stuff. They're getting information to you. They're teaching you. At university, you got to teach yourself. And if you are not self-motivated, if you don't have the good sort of study skills, you're going to flounder. And in this day and age, of course, when you have to borrow money in order to go, back in my day, the annual fee was $256. And I got a bursary from the government as well. So, yeah, it was a different environment there from 1980 to 1984. I think a lot of people just don't need to go to university. Take yourself maybe to the Polytech and get yourself a good qualification there. And of course, the issue is for many people, just maybe start out on your working career and pick up what skills you need along the way. So it's not everybody at all needs to go to university. No.
Yeah, sure. Great insights. And come to think of it, that's a pretty good ROI, Tony, the amount of money you said for your degree.
I know. Yeah, that's right. It was a different world. When somebody say, oh, young people, they've got it easy these days. Well, they've got it easy in terms of access to wonderful technology, which we only saw versions of, like in Star Trek from 1966 to 69. The iPad.
You would have paid that back in 10 minutes at your time at BNZ.
Oh, mate, yeah, it was. It's so young people. It's just a different world, different challenges, and that sort of thing. And that's where it gets interesting for businesses, I guess, hiring young people these days. They're looking for people who have good knowledge of how people are using data, how they research insights into products, where they're buying from. If you've been around in a business for a number of years, your awareness of how customers use your products, all this is probably well out of date. And you need the skills of people who have high familiarity with social media, obviously, in particular, and buying and assessing products online in order to stay up to date. So each year in the 80 or so talks I do, they're usually business or or real estate audiences. But for the business ones, I often emphasize you need to be hiring, young people who are going to be more aware of market shifts and sentiment changes, etc., than maybe yourself with your slower processes built up from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, or whatever.
Very good insights there, Tony. And just to digress, I do have to say I've watched you in many of an interview, and you seem to have quite the extensive range of ties there. How many ties do you actually have?
Probably only about 30, 35 or so. So I always wear a tie when I'm speaking. I always wear a tie when I'm doing anything like this online. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one of my proud moments was when I got to fifth form. So year 11 at high school back in I hit that 1975, and you could wear a blazer and a tie. And I thought, I want to wear a tie. And so A, it was always that. And B, I got a good collection of very different ties. This really isn't quite one of them, from a gentleman, Rickson Groove in Wellington, in the old BNZ building there, sort of Lambton Key area. And, one of 12 of these ties were made. So I'm proud of that collection. And then the third thing is, and this is, I've always thought as a general business principle, and I've used it generally for a lot of the things I do, have a point of difference. Do not look like all the other chickens in the yard. You want to have something that maybe people will remember you. So I know some people in the past have gone for the bow tie thing. I couldn't think of anything worse personally. No time for bow ties, all right? But I remember when it comes to, say, my speaking. So I do these talks throughout the year, and then people are organising me to speak, and they say, can you hurry up and get us your presentation, your PowerPoints or whatever you're going to use? Well, I never use PowerPoints. I just stand up and speak, give me a microphone and an audience and somewhere to stand, a hay bale or whatever, and I'm away laughing. Well, I partly decided on that over 30 years ago when I went along to a talk given by very good economist, Gareth Morgan. He set up Infometrics many years ago, ran it successfully, and I watched him speak. He had the whole light and sound show. There were speakers there, and there was the TV screens and everything. I thought, holy cow. I mean, I guess you enjoy this whole AV thing, but I don't have the time for that. My point of difference will be absolutely nothing. I'll just stand there and talk. So, one of my pieces of advice I often give to people is do not be like everybody else out there. You need to offer something different. If at a minimum, so people will remember you sort of and not be just lost in the general morass there, but maybe your point of difference is something that's actually very useful to them. And for me, partly that is another one of my points of difference. I speak in the language of the street, basically. I'd be no good as a diplomat or necessarily a politician or anything like that, but I try and speak at a language which the average person can understand, and seems to be a market out there for it.
Layman's terms always wins. And hey, look, Tony, it's a sad state of affairs that both of us are wearing white currently at the moment. So if they were trying to find us in a chicken yard, it'd be pretty easy.
Yeah, no, we'll be right.
Absolutely. Hey, so you're a chief economist at Bank of New Zealand for 26 years. What were some of the biggest takeaways from that role over that period that you still value today?
Oh, yes. Okay. I got a lot of lessons there. I was telling somebody about one of them just 2 days ago, that they wanted me to make some comments with them on air about Green Party policies with regard to tax changes, etc. Now, it's a perfectly valid request. What I learned working in the corporate sector for essentially 3.5 decades, and especially in my role as chief economist for almost 25 years, in fact, was try and avoid commenting directly, frankly, on political party policies. Maybe do it as an overall assessment of a number of them if you're doing that particular sort of focus. Be especially careful in election year as well. What I liked in the BNZ was I had high degree of freedom to do what I wanted to do, to speak what I wanted to speak about. And I used to say to people, I've got 98% freedom to sort of do what I want. But the 2%, you get that 2% wrong, you're going to be told off. And I used to get a new boss on average every 13 months. Every 3 months, I'd get a new boss. And so
wow.
I developed a welcome pack. Basically, welcome, you are my new boss. This is what I do. Here are my key outputs. I do these number of talks, etc. And I muck it up, about once every 3 years. About once every 3 years, that 2%, you know, it'll become a matter of moment. I'll say something, the wrong thing, and then again, this is something useful from having worked in a corporate there. When you make a mistake like that, you've used your shovel, you're digging a hole, and you've gone through a gas pipe or something. Stop digging. This is what politicians don't seem to learn. They say, I was justified in saying that or whatever. No. As soon as you've made a mistake, you just shut up shop, get off the media, don't be saying anything else. And if there is anything else to say, just apologize. I don't know about other countries, but in New Zealand, the power of apology is very strong. We all make mistakes. And then if you make a mistake, you say something wrong, etc., go out and apologize for it. And then if they keep attacking you, well, then it's maybe more saying something about the other person, not really about yourself. It depends what you've done, of course. Well,
True. Depends on the context. But I agree with you there. It's about accountability and putting your hand up and saying, hey, look, I mucked up, and we're all human. Everyone will forgive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. There are limits, but yeah, we all make mistakes there. And so even when you really want to stick the boot into somebody because look what they said, that's wrong, let's put the boot in. Yeah. What's that old thing? He with living in a glass house and chucking stones, or he without sin chucked the first stone through the glass house window. I've mixed up two metaphors there.
That's okay. We get the gist. Hey, you're a big fan of Tony Simpson's book, allegedly, The Sugar Bag Years, which chronicled the experience of Kiwis living through the Great Depression, Tony. Why do you love that book so much?
Yeah, so when back, my mum told me, go and read The Grapes of Wrath, and I've only read a bit of it, but I got interested in economics. And fairly early on, I kept coming across these references to New Zealand's sort of main book on the Great Depression years, The Sugar Bag Years by Tony Simpson. So Tony Simpson, he finished the book, which was started by his father. His father basically went around the country speaking with people who lived through the Depression, all the experiences they had in the cities, in the countryside, etc. And of course, these were sort of the words of people, layman's language, basically. And I just found it fascinating reading about not just the average people and what they did and their experiences, but also the realization a lot of people were not affected at all by the Great Depression. But being New Zealanders, they had enough sense to at least show some sort of sympathy, some sort of companionship with other people. They put their car up on the blocks, they take the wheels off or put them on blocks, etc. And so it was sort of a whole community focus there. So I've never met Tony Simpson. I know he's still out there. I'd like to one day, but every few years I will go through and read maybe 20 or 30 pages of the book, just as a reminder that economics, the field that I'm working in, and so many others there, it's really affecting people quite deeply out there.
Sure, absolutely. And if he does come on the Luke Farr show, you'll be the first to receive the interview, Tony.
Lovely. Thanks for that. Cool.
Very good. Hey, you left corporate life in September 2019. What's your number one piece of advice for the young bucks out there entering the corporate world today? Although it be very different to when you entered it.
Okay, so entering the corporate world today, let me see. They want you to be there. So just remember that you're going to start facing a different world from what you're used to. If you're working in a corporate, it's all about, there's a set of rules which makes the corporation work, and people have different roles in ensuring the rules are enforced to make sure the whole wheels keep turning, etc.
What are those common rules, Tony?
What are
those common rules?
The common rules, but basically live by the rules of the corporation in terms of the honesty, the products that they're promoting, the way you do business, so the culture of the place. So come in with an openness to find out what the culture of the organization is that you are going to work in there, and basically keep your mouth shut for a little while. Don't give some fresh stories to the assholes out there who like to say, and this young person, they were hired and then they were asked to do some sweeping on the floor in their first week, and then they resigned. And then somebody says, look at the bunch of snowflakes. Don't give ammunition to people who just want to take the proverbial like that. It's appalling. But basically learn. Go in and be the sponge. Just learn from all the people around you. And in that regard, my greatest learning there came from tramping many, many years ago. I used to do quite a bit of tramping 35 years ago. And there was one guy, I didn't really get on with him, but he was an excellent tramper. So every opportunity that came along, I would go tramping with him. It was sometimes a bit of a trial. His personality was challenging, but I learned more from him than any other person in the whole time. And so when you're starting with a corporation, be a sponge, just keep your mouth shut for a while, learn the culture, learn what's around you, and absorb information, and then start giving ideas, start giving different angles, different ways of looking at things, because there aren't that many corporates that just want the new cog, the new wheel to keep the thing functioning. The world we live in nowadays is one of change at a speed we couldn't have imagined when I, started Westpac back in Sydney in 1985. Things change quickly, and so your insights will be required. So take a little bit of time as the sponge, then start giving back with a few ideas and see how things go.
Good insights, and it sounds like also get close with your enemy. Sounds like you didn't really like that guy all too much, the guy you tramped with.
Oh, no, I liked him okay, and definitely not an enemy, but the personality, I just found it a bit difficult to work with. Nothing too major, but I made sure I went out tramping with him as much as possible, and I learned untold.
Yeah, very good, very good. Now, it wouldn't be an interview with an economist without talking about the economy. I mean, Tony, the outlook is uncertain again amid financial sector turmoil, high inflation, ongoing effects of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and 3 years of COVID. I mean, the baseline forecast, and this is after doing a bit of research, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but the baseline forecast is for growth to fall from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.8% in this year, this financial year, before settling at 3% in 2024. Tony, in your opinions, let's sort of look forward thinking. In your opinion, what sectors will thrive in the next 3 to 5 years and why?
Yeah. Who cares what sector it's going to be? It's the best operators that you want to find. In declining sectors, there are going to be those who are left to pick up the mess and end up with, 50 or 60% market share or so. So people are always looking for some guidance as to, where will be the greatest profitability, where will the customer flow be the strongest, but that's not necessarily the best way to look at it. Your starting point needs to be, what am I good at?
I just want to know what stocks to invest in, really, Tony.
Yeah, from an investor's point of view, it's something different. If you're looking at setting up a business, though, my first question of the person is, what have you got? What are you good at? And you work with that essentially, rather than saying, oh, the electronics industry looks good. Okay, suddenly I'm going to become an electrician. Yeah, that's going to take 5 years or something. So we've gone through an economic cycle by then. Us economists, we are very good at looking at the underlying trends when it comes to population change, inflationary pressures, these sort of things. When it comes to individual sectors, I think we struggle because of the speed of change which is happening out there, because of the new technologies which are coming along. And I, for instance, don't think there's a person on the planet at the moment can give me a good answer which I'd whack $100,000 on in terms of this is what AI is going to do. Don't know. It's going to do many things, but don't know exactly what it's going to do. And when you get new technologies coming along, people have to remember it's a process of Darwinism in action. Something is going to be tried and it will fail. Something else will get tried, it's going to fail. Something is tried and then it'll work, and then it goes and goes until it fails. And what gets left at the end, who knows? But it's very exciting, I suppose. And when we saw like cryptocurrencies coming along, there were firms starting up all over the place, trading the cryptos, developing the cryptos, the NFTs, etc. What will get left at the end will be a sector which is massively regulated up the wazoo, but still highly profitable for good operators with good product. Generally looking forward, starting point for New Zealand always has to be, we are a farm. We were a farm. We will be a farm. And it's simply a matter of, will we be having more and more cows or more and more sheeps or more and more Angora bunnies, or will it be organic, honey or something? Farming is a story of change. All farmers know that. So number one, farming is still going to be there in the future for New Zealand. It's just a question of them adapting what they do over time. Number two, manufacturing. Some people think that with some of the changes regarding geostrategic issues with China, we're going to get a lot of manufacturing now Coming back to New Zealand, no, we will not. We're a relatively high cost country to be a manufacturer in. And so while there will be some reshoring where it suits, we're not going to see a wholesale growth in the manufacturing sector again in New Zealand. All of us economists, everybody will say, oh, the technology sector is going to keep growing. That's because technology sort of covers everything. It's hard to get it wrong, but to try and pin down exactly what that means in technology, I think is very difficult. But certainly renewable energy is a rapidly growing field. But you see, if I had expertise in that, I wouldn't be pursuing it in New Zealand. I'd do it in Australia. You see, in New Zealand, about 84% plus of our electricity is already generated renewably. Australia's about 33%, aiming for 84% within about 10 years or so. That's where I would take those skills. So just because let's say I could come up with a list of 4 sectors here where I think these are going to perform well in New Zealand, doesn't mean I'd stay in New Zealand and pursue them. There might be better opportunities in that sector overseas. So there we go.
Sure. I love that. That's very good. And as volatile as it is, did you personally invest in Bitcoin?
Me? No, I don't have any cryptos. I don't have any shares outside some that's in a small KiwiSaver that I've got there. My investment has always explicitly been in my skills, my abilities, my learning. I've always viewed for myself investing as being, I suppose, my career. That's where my focus has been. I've always considered that a more honest way for me to grow my wealth over time than necessarily invest in housing or something. I'm not saying that's not a good way to go. It's worked exceedingly well for a lot of people. But what can I say? Personally, for me, I'd have considered that a little bit of a cop-out. I have always considered my best returns will come from pursuing what it is I consider myself to be good at. And in that regard, I hit, if I can remember this rightly, the quad factor. I'm good at economics. I enjoy the economics. Other people seem to like what I do in economics, and I get paid well for it as well. Now, not many people get the 4 things. They might get 1 or 2. You might be the best banjo player in New Zealand, but you hate playing the banjo. So what's the use? You know?
I love that. It's very good. Hey, Tony, you mentioned briefly there property. I mean, in your opinion, do you think property is a smart investment? And if so, why?
Oh, I think for many people, it is, because not everybody, I think, can sort of pursue the career option that I have, just backing my skill set wholeheartedly. And we have to remember, a third of the population is still renting. There is a need for rental accommodation in every country. Not everybody is going to be in a position to become an owner-operator straight away. So we need the rental stock to be supplied. The government councils definitely do not have the ability to do it. That's just impossible. And so instead, you actually need the private sector to be providing that rental property. And so I think for people to go in and invest in property to be rented out to somebody else, perfectly valid business and long-term investment activity. Keep your focus on the long term, however. Be wary of trying to pick the bottom of the cycle in prices. None of us can do it. We only know where the bottom is when we've gone beyond it and we go back, oh, there it was, back in March or whatever in New Zealand, or February in Australia. So look to run it as a business, and maybe try and look at places where population growth is likely to be, relatively good over the longer term. That doesn't mean you don't buy in places of low population growth, but look where the infrastructure is going as well. So where will the new motorway go? Where will the exit ramp be? Is there going to be scope for a suburb to be built there? Maybe it's worth buying 10 acres out there and sitting and waiting for 10 or 15 years. Hey, that's what people used to have done many times overseas, and that's what plenty of people still do here in New Zealand as well. So I'm definitely a supporter of investment in residential property, but once the cycle gets going and people start feeling the FOMO and it's an easy thing, what happens then is something quite specific. People who never thought about investing in property, and frankly maybe shouldn't because they don't understand it or have the risk tolerance, they think, I've got to, because they've already made 70 grand. I've got no choice. I've got to do it as well, or I'm going to feel like an idiot. That's when things start to get dangerous. We're not anywhere near that part. That's 3 to 4 years away for this particular cycle.
Yeah, that's a really good topic, that around especially that social proofing of all your friends and family getting into property and doing it. And therefore, it's about keeping up with the Joneses, right? You don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
You can't be getting into something like that just because you feel like you're missing out. Like, you got to be getting into it for the right reasons, i.e., well, A, can you afford it? B, do you want to be in that area for a prolonged period of time because you're kind of pigeonholed and stuck in some sense?
Yep.
And C, how do you feel about owning a home? Is it right for you as the individual, right?
Yeah, and at the time of your life, I mean, if you own a home, then sure you could rent it out and then go traveling overseas or whatever. But it is an extra sort of impediment to the efficient functioning of the labour market in a country, and it sort of maybe reduces your options for what you can do going forward. I mean, hey, in the same bucket there, we've got maybe getting married could reduce your options for what you're going to do, or having a child early on. Maybe it's the same sort of thing. Goodness forbid that I say that. But people have to understand whatever they're investing in, whether it be a crypto asset, whether it be residential property, commercial property, equities, you've got to understand what it is that moves their prices around. You've got to understand the risk of the asset, and you've got to have a feeling for your own ability to withstand the risk. So if you purchase an asset and it goes down in price by 20%, have you seen this before? Do you know that this can happen? If you haven't seen it before and you don't know it can happen, what are you going to do when it falls in 20%? What's going to happen is you'll think a miracle has just occurred. Oh my goodness, this thing's gone down by 20%. I didn't expect that. But now I know it's going to go down by another 20%. You think you suddenly were given an ability to forecast where the price is going to go after it's fallen. But what's really happening is that you're worried it's going to go lower. And so psychologically, you are prepared to crystallize your loss of 20% to avoid the little chance there might be another 20% fall, and everybody thinks you're an idiot and you're going to regret not selling it. This is what we saw in the early days of the pandemic.
That's a very good point. Is it true it's an 8 to 10 year cyclical? It's cyclical, 8 to 10 year with property at the ups, ebbs and flows?
Yeah, I'm glad you put a range on that. Some people say, oh, it's 7 years or it's 10 years. Nah, 7 to 10, whatever. There definitely is a cycle which runs through there. A lot of the cycle is determined by the state of the economy, inflationary pressures, the investment cycle, etc. And this, about half an hour ago or so, I made mention of the 12 years or so of growth in house construction in New Zealand. It was due for a decline, and now house building is going to fall for the next 2 to 3 years in our country, for instance, and house prices rising up. What happens is you've got to think of people buying an asset in the shape of a pyramid. At the top, you've got the ultimate professionals, maybe been doing it for generations. They know the cycles. They know to sell when the market's still rising. They know to buy while it's still falling, etc. And as you go down the ladder, you end up somewhere. There's the bottom layer of the pyramid, and that unfortunately is the great unwashed. It's the uninformed person who gets a bit scared, motivated by FOMO. They can't really afford to invest in the thing, but they think, I've got to, because otherwise I'm going to miss out. Unfortunately, they just get weeded out, become cannon fodder when things fall over at the other end, and they sell and crystallize a loss. Even if they'd held on, then they'll eventually gain on the way up. The people higher up the pyramid, they know exactly the psychological behavior of the people down the bottom and how to profit from it, over time, unfortunately, as well.
And in essence, I mean, that is the famous adage, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, right?
Yeah, well, the poor, unfortunately, they get dragged into doing things which are maybe outside their skill set. It doesn't mean they can't get exposure to that asset, but frankly, they may be better off getting a professional to manage it for them. Maybe it's going to be a listed residential property investment, vehicle, for instance. Maybe it's going to be an aggregator of a number of crypto assets. But if you do it yourself, you're going to be looking at the price of these things every day, and you'll be panicking. Now, at the cost of $200, that's what I found out.
Attention. This is a fire alarm test. I repeat, this is a fire alarm test. No action is required. This is a fire alarm test. No action is required. Thank you.
Can you just let him know that there's no fires here?
Yeah, there's no fire at the moment. Well, that's going to be interesting. So I wonder if they're going to give us the buzzing. Yeah, okay. Here's the buzzing.
You're not in Canada, are you? Because there are fires currently.
Hopefully that was about it. Yeah, there was one at the Q1 building. In case anybody doesn't realise, when you're looking at this, I'm on the Gold Coast Broadbeach at the moment, and there was one at the tallest residential tower in Australia.
The Q1, oh, very good. Are you living in the Gold Coast these days, Tony?
No, I'd spend maybe a quarter of my time over here, essentially. So all of my work, apart from physical stand-up presentations, I can do it over here as well as back in New Zealand.
Oh, that's good. Where's your home base? Wellington or?
Wellington. I'm born and bred out of Christchurch, left there in 84, 2.5 years in Sydney, but on 10-acre block north of Wellington. Now, I did mention about, so what, $200, what did I learn? Well, I had a bursary in 1980 in my first year at university. I had a 10-speed bike and a Meccano set and no girlfriend, so I didn't need the money. Basically, the government was paying me about $900 a year. So I started buying and selling shares. And there was a particular equity, Mosgiel Mills, and it was sort of going through some liquidation. It was having tough times, and the share price would go from 10 cents, 2 cents, 8 cents, 4 cents. And I thought, oh, this is easy. I'll buy low, sell high, buy low, sell high. I bought at 4 cents. I sold at 2 cents. What did I learn from my $200 loss? I didn't have the ability to stick with my strategy once I started to make a loss, and I thought I'd rather crystallize my loss and lose only 200 rather than the full 400. So that's, you see, why I often talk about the bottom of the pyramid people there and the FOMO and how being scared can lead you to making the bad decisions. It only cost me $200 to learn, no, I should never be a trader of assets. I need to pursue a different career.
Correct. And in essence, staying in your lane, working to your strengths, delegating or letting someone else do your weaknesses. Hey, let's talk hypothetically. If you were to be 35 in 2023 and you had $100,000 in the bank, would you buy a house right now?
Let's see, if I didn't think something better was coming along as a use for that money down the track, I mean, maybe I'm into the entrepreneurial space and maybe I think an opportunity might come up for something I'll develop or my friends might develop, in which case I might keep the money to the side for that. But if I decided my long term was going to be in New Zealand, well, we're pretty much at the bottom of the house price cycle in New Zealand at the moment. For some regions, they would have bottomed out in February. Some are going to bottom out in December this year. You know, that's different regions, different locations, that sort of thing. Then I think from that longer term point of view, I personally would be quite happy to make a house purchase at the moment. And the average age for a first home buyer in New Zealand currently is about 34 years of age. So you're sort of almost right on the button there with the timing. And I've been saying to first home buyers for quite some time now, don't know when prices bottom out. Don't worry if you buy and then prices go down, 5% more. There's a great number of listings at the moment. You can pick and choose. You can probably find the property which is going to suit you. It might be near the supermarket you like, the church you go to, the school you want to send your kids to, or whatever. Focus on those attributes and just recognize at the moment, you're not competing against investors because they're not really in the market at the moment. And you've sort of got a good number of listings. You've got the market to yourself. And so if you can get the credit from the bank there, I personally, at this point in the cycle, would have no hesitation in buying if it was going to be my first home purchase.
Sure. Very good. Yep. And for people out there that are looking, www.homes.co.nz is a great resource. All the info there. They are not sponsoring the show, by the way. But a big shout out to Autophagy Skincare, who is sponsoring the show. Anyhow, that's all we've got time for today. Tony Alexander, thank you so much for coming on the Luke Farr Show, a show to motivate, educate, and inspire our next generation of leaders. You provide some very, very tangible insights, and I really do appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, everybody. Ta-da.
Thanks, Tony. I'll just hit stop record.